IC. All right, 3, 2, and 1. Pack your bags, hop in the virtual bus. The spring football tour around the Big Ten Conference starts today on the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Big Ten podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ben Stevens. It is Monday, April 5th, and today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Go to BuiltBar.com and use the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. It is the start of the spring football tour around the glorious Big Ten Conference. Over the next couple of weeks, we will check in with all 14 programs in Big Ten football to see how their spring practice session is going. Some are done, some are in the midst of it, some are continuing on here this spring. It is also a Monday, which means it is the Stevens and Stevens podcast. So very aptly for me, I not only get to host with my man Jay Stevens at the Locked On Buckeyes podcast, but I begin the spring football tour on the Locked On Big Ten show with last year's Big Ten champions, although some might debate that, but last year's Big Ten champions, the Ohio State Buckeyes. So Jay, pleasure to have you back on the podcast once again.
Big Ten Ben. It's good to be back. Happy we're talking football. The basketball season is almost over. It's for the country. It's been over for the Big Ten for quite a long, well, most schools in the Big Ten for quite a long time. But when football season comes around, and as I have found out recently doing some guest appearances on different podcasts, when Jay gets to talk football, a certain part of him gets to come out, and it's like he is a kid again. So, Ben, I expect today to be a fun show talking about the Buckeye football team.
There's nothing better than spring football. It's filled with hope. It's filled with excitement for the year to come. It even is furthered into fall camp, but it's a spring awakening of sorts where we get to delve back into our football programs. 14 teams in the Big Ten. Over the next 2 weeks, we will check in with them. We start at the top of the Big Ten East. We will work our way down through the 2020 Big Ten football standings and then move over divisions into the western side of the Big Ten Conference and check in with those 7 teams as well. But we start with last year's Big Ten champions. Yes, it was a weird year. Yes, we can all make our jokes about the rules that were made up and then taken away, whatever. We're not focusing on 2020. We're focusing on the outlook for Ohio State for 2021. And Jay Stevens, the biggest question for Ohio State this spring is who is going to replace Justin Fields at the quarterback position. So, Jay Stevens, I ask you, who is going to replace Justin Fields at the quarterback position?
Wait, you guys don't care about Shaun Wade not being there anymore? It's all about Justin Fields?
That's another question I have for you later in the show as well. We'll focus on the defense, but I think it's got to start with Ryan Day's signal caller and who's leading that offense next year in 2021.
Honestly, it's up in the air. I say that as in like they know who a guy might be. One of 3. Kyle McCord, of true freshman, CJ Stroud, or, wow, the other name escaped me. That's bad, Ben.
Jack Miller.
There you go. I talked about him.
The only reason I know that is because I just read an article about 15 minutes before we started talking, so it's just fresh on the mind. Not crazy. I mean, your expertise is far beyond mine.
Crazy. I shouldn't forget that name. Reggie Miller, Jack Miller. Last name should stick in my head being an Indiana guy. But so right now in spring practice, you're getting some time to see all 3 guys compete. All 3 guys make throws. And from the clips that I have seen from spring practice, these guys can rip it. These guys can throw. We know they wouldn't be at Ohio State being a quarterback if they couldn't throw the ball. So that's not really a guess. They all can throw the ball. They all can make some similar throws. To me, it's all about the mind, all the mentals, all the mistakes on the field, the intangibles. I have heard possibly it's going to be CJ Stroud, between Stroud and Miller, but I wouldn't count out McCord, the true freshman, either. But I think it's more of a 2-headed race. Really, really hard for a guy who is a true freshman to come in and win this battle when the other guys have been there. They know the system, they know the offense, they know what Day wants from his quarterback. My guess right now, it would be Stroud, but it is a 3-headed race. Stroud, Miller, McCord. Who will it be? I understand how Ryan Day thinks. I don't believe that going into the spring game, he'll name a starter. After the spring game, he'll name a starter. I believe even social media posts, they'll be going back and forth playing into it. They'll show one of all 3 quarterbacks playing quarterback, so you don't know who it is. Probably got to wait till the fall. Right before game 1, he'll announce the depth chart. There we go. But it is a 3-headed race. We'll see who wins it in the fall.
Ryan Day has even said as such, as Ohio State fans and media members alike want to know who the front runner is. He actually kind of revels that position where he's going to be like, hey, you're not going to hear from me for a little bit of time about who our starter will be. So he likes that spot. He likes people having some questions from the outside, despite what they know within the halls of the Woody Hayes Athletic Complex. In my mind, I think it will be C.J. Stroud, backed up by Jack Miller. Both of those guys, redshirt freshmen. I think Kyle McCord is a very talented freshman. Also, Quinn Ewers coming next year to Columbus, but that's still a year away. Maybe on next year's spring football tour. But neither C.J. Stroud, neither Jack Miller, or Kyle McCord have attempted a single pass attempt at the collegiate level. So big shoes to fill when you talk about Justin Fields and the impact he made for that Ohio State football program and the hopeful impact he makes in the NFL. I think, like you, Jay Stevens, when all is said and done, it will be C.J. Stroud at the helm of that offense for Ohio State's opener on a Thursday night against Minnesota in early September. That many, many moons away. We are in the spring football tour. We still have fall camp on the horizon. So before we even get to fall camp, let's focus on these spring practices for Ohio State and go to the other side of the ball. You mentioned the departure of Shaun Wade. Also some gaps at the linebacking position for Ohio State and Kerry Coombs in this next year's defense. What is your biggest question mark on the defensive side of the ball for the Buckeyes?
Biggest question mark, and I'll put it this way. With there being 4 linebackers that are leaving Ohio State, 3 starters and 1 backup, and I believe 3 of the 4 will be drafted. Borland, who was a starter, multiple-year starter, I don't know if he'll be starter or be an undrafted free agent. I think he's kind of like on the fringe, a back burner. I think Hilliard, the non-starter, will be drafted in the NFL.
Yep.
For this year's linebackers, you're going to have 4 or 5 that show they can start. They possibly deserve a spot. Where do they put them? Are they interchangeable? Do we see a difference from the defense where you're running a 4-2-5, a multiple 4-3, to where one guy goes back as a joker or a rover or a robber type of defender to where you're more of a multiple set? Or do you stay with your 4-3, take him out, and bring in a corner to go to your old school or current nickels back set? That's what I'm curious about, because you got guys there that have been there, that know the system. They know what Coombs wants as a defensive coordinator. But now you get Coombs getting more time solely focusing on the defense, not having to do double duty between the defensive coordinator spot and DB role that he had last year. I think you're going to have a few guys, 4 or 5 guys, that prove they can play starting roles at Ohio State. How do they go from going from 5 to 4 and then 4 to 3? Do they play 4 like the Ohio State did at the end of the season? Those are some thoughts in my head about that particular spot.
What about the defensive secondary? We know we lose guys like Shaun Wade, but Josh Proctor, Sevyn Banks, they come back in return for that Ohio State defense. Are you feeling confident about what you've seen so far in spring practice, about what that group will bring next year for the defense?
So my thing with the secondary is, one, Marcus Hooker. You mentioned Josh Proctor started late. Marcus Hooker started early. Marcus Hooker recently got suspended indefinitely for a DUI, his second one at Ohio. Well, it was a couple weeks ago, but you and I haven't talked football like that. So recent to you and I, Ben. So that's one thing. Josh Proctor, I think, is going to start at that free safety or single high safety spot. No questions asked. If Hooker is there, maybe. The thing I'm curious about is Lathan Ransom. Now, he is listed as a safety, but I have heard he has shown a lot of growth and a lot of maturity, and he has gotten a lot better, and he is showing you're going to have a hard time keeping this young man off the field. So will he be in that nickel spot? Is he your rover? Is he the guy that goes up and back on the defense? Because I believe possibly he can play that role. Is that his role? Sevyn Banks started opposite of Shaun Wade last year, recently got injured. He is out for the rest of spring practice. Cam Martinez has shown some promise at the cornerback spot. So I'm wondering, Lathan Ransom, how does he fit in? Josh Proctor, does he get that starting spot that I believe he will get? And good thing is you have Marcus Williamson there, so he's going to be playing. I'm just wondering, Ransom, where is he going to fit? How are you going to put him on the field? Because of what I've seen, what I've heard, he's very, very talented. It's going to be a hard decision to make to leave that young man on the sidelines.
Lathan Ransom, also one of the best early contender names in the Big Ten Conference so far that I have heard. That is a wonderful name for anybody playing on the defensive side of the football. Lathan Ransom, can you imagine a pick, an interception, Ransom, taken away. I'm all thinking of things here as we get ready to go in this spring football tour on a Monday, April 5th, the Stevens and Stevens podcast of the Locked On Big Ten show, but also with the Ohio State expertise and insight coming from our man, the host of Locked On Buckeyes, Jay Stevens. So we've talked about some gaps that Ohio State needs to fill this year. But in your mind, Jay, what is the best returning position group Ohio State can expect to have this season?
Oh, that's easy. O-line. Have you seen Nicholas Petit-Frere and Thayer Munford play tackle? Have you seen what I believe what Harry Miller can do, but going back to his starting center spot, Paris Johnson Jr., a youngster, but people believe that he'll eventually win the Outland Trophy. That's just how good he was last year as a freshman in practice. Didn't get much playing time on the field. Did get a starting role, I believe, against Michigan State. Forget if he got much playing time after that. But I do think one thing that benefits Ohio State, which hurt them at times last year, but also helped them a little bit. Ben, you remember there were 3 games, I believe, that Ohio State did not play due to the Rona. Positive cases, game got canceled. A young man by the name of Matt Jones started at left guard because I believe Josh Myers couldn't play. Harry Miller goes over to center, his original spot, Michigan State games particularly, and that was when, I believe you remember, Trey Sermon started to get his groove, started to get his role and find out where the holes and get the chemistry with the offensive line. So Matt Jones, to me, is going to be a starting left guard, but in a typical year, no COVID, you probably don't have those absences on the O-line for him to get those reps last year. So this year, I believe he'll be the starting left guard. Harry Miller is your starting center. Paris Johnson Jr. starting right guard. That interior of the O-line, you're getting spring ball, you're getting a true fall camp, and some reps from last season with those 3 guys on the O-line. I think that's going to help the running back position get more loose early on in the season because Matt Jones got reps when he didn't expect to get reps during last year.
I love your beginning to that answer. It's like I almost offended you by asking that question, who is the best returning group? But you can tell the enthusiasm in Jay Stevens' voice here as we start our spring football tour. Just talking a little shot between the white lines on the gridiron here for spring practices all around the Big Ten Conference. It did surprise me, though, Jay Stevens, I must admit, because I thought you were going to say the wide receivers that are returning because Chris Olave is back, Garrett Wilson is back, Jackson Smith and Jigba is back. They add in one of the best receiver recruits in all the country in Emeka Egbuka. I'm surprised you did not say the wide receiver group for that Ohio State offense.
So, Ben, when I look at the O-line wide receiver, it's kind of like 1A, 1B. You can't go wrong either way. Wide receiver, yes, the more sexy, the more glamorous. They want to get more of the shine. You're going to get Olave in the end zone doing a slight celebration, not getting a flag, a small little slight celebration. So, yes, Olave, Wilson, future pros. The rest of them we'll see, but we believe that there will probably be a future pro that's not starting next year at Ohio State. But Thayer Munford and Nicholas Petit-Frere, you can't do anything with those guys at all. To the point that you can't even get a pressure on the quarterback with those guys playing on the right and left tackles spots for Ohio State. So as good as Olave and Wilson are, and I can't knock how good they are, how great they have been as receivers, and I'm so happy that Olave decided to stay at Ohio State. I'm equally as excited about the offensive line position because, 1, they're good. But 2, a quarterback's best friend, a new starter, is a good, strong O-line. Yes, Harry Miller was the weakest link last year, but I believe he'll be a whole lot better going back to his original center spot. C.J. Stroud, Miller, McCord, whoever is starting. They can look at those big men up front, see 6'6", 6'4", 6'4". Just some of the heights that are there. I could get to the weights. All of, I believe, above 300 pounds. Mm-hmm. All of those guys, those big, massive men up front, will help and aid the quarterback as much as Wilson and Olave will.
I love it. I love it. I mean, listen, you're talking about an Ohio State roster that is chock full of talent. You could also throw in the defensive front 4 in there as well with guys like Zach Harrison back, Tyreek Smith back, Haskell Garrett back. You add in Jack Sawyer, the number 4 overall prospect heading into Ohio State this year in the 2021 class. So much talent across the board for Ohio State. Master Teague takes the full reins as their leading running back coming back into this year for that Ohio State offense. So I ask you this, Jay Stevens, and we will finish off our time here on the spring football tour focusing on Ohio State with this idea. We are still many, many months away from the Big Ten football regular season getting underway, the college football year in September getting started. We have a full spring camp to finish. We have a full fall camp to finish before we even really dive into the 2021 schedule. But having to replace Justin Fields with the talent Ohio State currently has on the roster, do you think they have the makeup to get back to the college football playoff?
Yes. I'm glad you said playoff and not championship game. Yes, I do. I think I talked to either you or somebody else. Yes, it's a spring. Yes, it's early. Yes, it's not like we're playing a game tomorrow or the players. But I think this is possibly the year or the first year in Ryan Day's tenure as head coach at Ohio State. There is a regular season game that will be a loss. Will it be against Oregon? I don't know. Will it be against the team up north? I don't believe so. Will it be against Michigan State? I don't think so either. Will it be against Indiana on the road? Maybe. New quarterback there as well. Defense really improved. They just gave Tom Allen an extension, so he got more money and a longer contract. So maybe. I don't know. But I do believe this is the year that we see Ryan Day, for the first time in his tenure as head coach at Ohio State, lose in the regular season. And I possibly think part of it is new quarterback. It's probably an early season loss, not a late season loss. But I do think one loss, you're still going to be in the Big Ten championship, and they're still going to be in the playoff. I have no questions about that, no doubts about that. I think they're too talented on numerous positions. You asked about the secondary earlier. There are going to be guys in the secondary that would play anywhere else, but don't play at Ohio State because they're at Ohio State. Too much talent. There are going to be guys. You mentioned the defensive ends and Jack Sawyer. I'm looking at a depth chart, or a chart right now that I made a couple months ago. It's like my projected depth chart, 2 deep, 3 deep for some positions, offense and defense. When I look at the defensive end spots, if Jack plays, weak or strong side DN or right or left side DN, he could easily be in the third spot for either position. That's just how talented the defensive end role is and how talented he is. He's still going to have to wait his turn to get onto the field. Yes, he's talented. There's a possibility he could get in a rotation as a freshman. But you got Tyreek Smith. You mentioned Zach Harrison. You still got Tyler Friday and Javonte Jean-Baptiste that got time last year. They got playing time last year. Then you got to add in Noah Potter, redshirt sophomore. So much talent at the DN spot. So there's a lot of talent. But I do think this is the year that Ohio State loses in the regular season. Not your question, but I got to throw it in. It's springtime. A loss is not a bad thing. It's been a luxury that Ohio State has had Justin Fields the past 2 years to be as good as they have had. I think the early season woes of a new quarterback, not because Justin Fields got playing time, played 12 games at Georgia. These guys maybe got a cup of coffee, a couple plays. I believe they both scored on a run play different times of the season. I think the young quarterback early in the season will hurt them. Only one loss, but one loss, not the end of the world.
Listen, in a normal college football season, and I say normal when most teams will play a 12 full game slate like we have this year in 2021, as opposed to 2020 when there were so many different variables as we looked at it from the college football playoff perspective. If you have one loss, it is not a death sentence, especially if that one loss comes early on in the season and you finish off the year winning 6, 7, 8 straight games. That looks favorably, at least based on historic trends, in the eyes of the college football playoff committee. So if that happens and Ryan Day suffers his first regular season loss, the horror. I still think Ohio State will be all right, contending for that Final Four spot in the college football playoff, and I think they'll get there once again. Giving us the expertise on the first stop of our spring football tour in Columbus, Ohio, Jay Stevens here on a Stevens and Stevens Monday podcast for the Locked On Big Ten Show. Also the host of Locked On Buckeyes, keeping you up to date with everything, and I mean everything you need to know throughout these spring workouts in the Woody Hayes Athletic Complex, in Columbus, Ohio. Jay Stevens, as always, my man, pleasure talking with you. It was nice talking some football once again. It makes an aching Big Ten heart from the college basketball season and the postseason we had feel a lot better.
I bet it does, but it's been fun to be back here with you once again, but our normal weekly Monday spot. And yes, football season, special to you, helps you heal, almost therapeutic for what the Big Ten did during the NCAA tournament, but also for me as well. Football season is special. It comes around once a year. Once a week we get games. Yes, we get some action early in the week. We get some games on a Thursday night. But Big Ten football is special. The only odd thing, I hate ending the show on a negative note, but you mentioned it, Ohio State, Minnesota, on a Thursday to open the season. That does seem a little odd to me. I'm more of a Saturday traditionalist guy for college football, but at the same time, Ohio State does have their own window to open the season. There may be more games on at that time, but everybody knows when Ohio State is on, when they're playing football, everyone's watching.
I'll say this. It is April 5th, 2021. It is a Monday in the month of April. We have a very long way to go until the start of the 2021 college football season. The Big Ten still runs through Columbus, Ohio. Jay Stevens, the host of Locked On Buckeyes, rounding out a wonderful Stevens in Stevens Monday episode. Jay, coming tomorrow, a guy you are familiar with as well, I hope, our Indiana football expert and basketball expert, everything expert, Jack Grossman, back to talk about that team that Tom Allen coaches in Bloomington. Can it be another historic year for IU football? Are they a football school now? We'll have to wait and see what Jack says on our next stop on the spring football tour throughout the Big Ten East. Jay Stevens, the host of Locked On Buckeyes, a pleasure as always. Until we talk tomorrow, everybody, have a splendid Monday.